Hello, everyone. It is Kathy with Backyard Columbus, and today's episode is called Success with Tomatoes. So, I would like to also say again that I am not an expert. I share on these episodes my experience and my ideas. I am not a master gardener, but I am passionate about what I'm doing in my backyard, and one of those is vegetable gardening. So, if you're like me and you're on Instagram, boy oh boy, do I dislike everyone in California. I mean, seriously, we struggle here in Ohio the late part of November, December, January, February, and we're looking at nothing but brown and cold. And they're like showing you these beautiful plants and the sun is shining and they're like, look at my tomato. And I'm like, well, good for you. So I grow lots and lots and lots of tomatoes. I've stopped because I love planting all kinds of things. I've stopped planting all kinds of things. Things that I don't like. Why would I grow those just to try them? Because they're taking up valuable space in my landscaping. So I've skinned it down to the basics: tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, things like that. But tomatoes, I grow a lot of different varieties. And again, I'm not an expert in growing tomatoes, but I will share with you some of the things I've learned, some of the things I've researched, and some of the things that I'm going to try this year and see if it helps me better. All right. So, first of all, right out of the gate, don't try to put your tomato plant in partial sun. It's not going to work. The thing's going to die. Tomatoes are sun lovers, all right? 6 hours minimum, but apparently they are more happy with 7 to 8 hours. As much sun as they can get, that's what they love. And also, I should add right out of the gate, if you're like so inspired by my episode today that you run out and buy tomato seeds and go plant them, don't do that. So, tomatoes here in Ohio, whether it's plant or seed, you need to start those. You can start them inside now as seeds, put them under a grow light, or I'm fortunate enough we have a greenhouse, just a hobbyist greenhouse, but they're on heat mats, okay? So that's actually, after today's episode, I'm going to plant all my tomato seeds. I'm super excited about it. But as a plant, if you like to just buy a plant, put that in a raised bed or in a pot. That is after Mother's Day, after the last frost date for Ohio. That's usually right around Mother's Day. That's why people usually say plant after Mother's Day, because otherwise a hard frost could come along, and even right around Mother's Day, I'd keep your eye open because you want to cover that little baby so it doesn't die. All right. So lots of sun. That's the first thing in success with tomatoes. The second thing is watering consistently. When you get tomatoes that crack on the bottom, it's because they get too much water, then not enough, and then it splits. Like, who really cares about it? Cares about that at the end of the day? Because we're not trying to sell beautiful tomatoes. We just want to grow tomatoes so we can eat them. But that's why they tend to crack. There is another thing called end rot, and that is apparently also can be from inconsistent watering. So that's why you want to make sure that you are consistently watering your tomatoes. On that note, I would encourage you that if you are not a big outdoors person, but you would like to grow tomatoes, plant them in a spot that you're going to go to. All right, say you have a pretty deep yard and in the very back of your yard, it's really sunny. But if you're never going to go back there, that's really not going to help you out because you're never going to go back there. So if you have a sunny spot on your patio, and this is the first year of doing tomatoes, then get some big pots and put tomatoes in the pots. I didn't do a podcast episode about this. Well, I think I did actually on raised bed gardening, but I did an Instagram video about it. I got from Costco a raised bed like 3 feet tall. It kind of looked like a great big huge flower box. You can grow tomatoes in that, and so put that on your patio or wherever you will actually be, because that's the whole point, is gardening should be something you enjoy, not a big labor where you got to trek out to the back of your property if it's not something that you love to do. But anyway, on that note, if you're going to get pots, then it does matter what kind of tomato that you get. And I'm getting a little bit deep into this, but I want you to have success. And again, this is something that I didn't know until a few years ago. On the package of tomatoes, it should say determinate or indeterminate tomato. Okay, it starts with a D or it starts with an I. The determinate type of tomato grows in more of a bushy, has a more bushy habit, and it won't go all over the place. If you're familiar with tomatoes at all, there are several varieties of tomatoes, like lots and lots, that just keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and you got to trellis them up, and they're flopping all over the place, and they don't look very pretty, but you're getting lots of delicious tomatoes. That is not something that you would want to plant in your fancy cedar box I just mentioned from Costco, because it's going to look like trash. All right, you would want to get a determinate type. Again, not an expert in this, I would even read it for cherry tomatoes, because not all cherry tomatoes stay in a little compact form. Now, you can keep tomatoes pruned, and I would encourage you to do that if you don't want things going everywhere. But, we're just trying to make the least amount of work for ourselves that we can. So that's why I'm sharing that. At the end of the day, if you forget to look at that on the seed package, it's not going to be the end of the world. You're just going to have a little bit more tomato vine than you would hope for, okay? So we've talked about the sun. We've talked about watering consistently, determinate or indeterminate. Now, organic fertilizers. Tomatoes are very heavy feeders, and they like good nutrition. So get an organic fertilizer, and it should tell you how often to fertilize your tomato plants, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Or, like I always say, Google, how often should I fertilize my tomato plants throughout the summer? And it will certainly give you an answer. The second, or the whatever number we're on, I would plant them deeply. And after I read that the other day, I perhaps might be guilty of this myself. Just don't put it surface level and, the top of the roots. Don't just plant it to the top of the roots. The thing that I read was plant it all the way up to the first set of leaves. That way it'll get a good root system, and you'll be better off. Mulch, exposed soil the nutrients get leached out by the sun, and you don't want that. You want all the nutrients you can in your soil so that it helps feed your plants. So just a good layer of mulch will help retain the moisture and help suppress weeds. And on that note, this is something that I'm going to try this year. This may be a little bit more information than you're currently wanting right now, especially if you're just getting started with tomatoes. But bear with me, because it really isn't complicated, but it's just another thing to consider, is companion planting. And in my terms, because I did not look that up before I just brought it up, companion planting is plants that you plant together, if that makes sense. So we have eggplant. What do we plant with that? Or I just know I'm going to get this wrong. In the old days, Indians or old time farmers, they would plant squash and corn and something else all together. The point is they all benefit each other. A corn plant, you could plant, it might be beans. You could plant beans next to the corn, because then the beans will trellis up the corn stalk. So all of these have beneficial things. Sweet potato vines are something that you can grow in your vegetable beds as well, because those vines act like a mulch, and they cover the soil, keep the moisture in, and then you get another edible food item out of it. But for the purposes of tomatoes, here is what I have discovered: basil, chives, thyme, marigolds, and nasturtiums. Nasturtiums, if you've never heard of those, look those up. Nasturtiums. They're beautiful flowers. They have a nice peppery flavor. You can add those to your salad. So those are also great additions to plant in your box, that raised box I told you about, or even just if you're flatly old school way of growing your gardens or your vegetables in a garden bed. You can plant those in there as well. But the thing with the marigolds and the nasturtiums, they will also attract pollinators, because tomatoes need pollinators to develop fruit. So the bees go from, in the same with everything in your garden that would bloom. Cucumbers, squash, those need a pollinator to go from flower to flower, and then they pollinate each other, fertilize all the flowers, and that's how you get the fruit. If you didn't have any pollinators, which is why people talk about pollinators all the time, it is kind of a great big deal that pollinators are on the decline. We don't want that, because we want to keep eating and living. So if you spread some flowers around, not even talking about companion plants now, you just want to jazz up your garden bed a little bit, add some zinnias in there. You can plant those by seed after the last frost, and those will help attract not only butterflies, of course, but bees that will help pollinate your tomato plants. So I think that I have, yep, that covers all of it. Sun, consistent watering, fertilizer, companion plants. Make a good decision as best you can on the kind of tomato that you're getting, and you will have a very yummy summer tomato season. So drop me a line if you have any other questions. I will try my best to answer it. If you have ideas you'd love to share, that would be great. If this is your first year growing a tomato plant or anything else that I've covered in my podcast episodes that you would like to share, I would love to share that on my Instagram to show how we're all changing up our suburban landscape. That would be really fun. So I thank you for listening and have a great day.